Hi, and welcome to Guitar Economics Conversations. I'm joined with Mr. Mark Phillips, and today we are talking about arthritis and how that affects the guitarist hands and what options there are to deal with it. I hope you enjoyed.
Okay, Paul, so I thought we'd talk about arthritis in guitarists a little bit. We've seen a few patients with arthritis, haven't we? Although most of the patients we see are younger, we do get some older patients who've actually developed wear and tear osteoarthritis in their hands. I think from my point of view, the commonest type of arthritis I see in guitarists is thumb-based arthritis, usually somebody after a 30 or 40-year history of playing guitar with a prominent swollen joint just here. There's sometimes some hyperextension in this joint here, and it's rather stiff, and the span is reduced because the normal hand should have a healthy Y shape coming between that metacarpal and this one down to the forearm. And in fact, you get this thing we call a square hand deformity. Sorry, this background's messing it up. But essentially a square hand deformity where there's hyperextension here and a little bump just comes here. And that's a very common type of thing. And you can imagine, you sometimes get patients then going into what we call the swan neck position like that. Some patients will go into a boutonniere deformity to try to counteract it. But yes, it's all kicking off down here in the base of the thumb. And they come quite distressed with thumb-based arthritis. And then, of course, we see people with arthritis in these smaller joints who have deformities, sometimes have these little Heberden's nodes, the little nodules at the sides of the end joint that we call the distal interphalangeal joint, the DIP joint, and then they've got to find workarounds. Sometimes these joints are unstable and they wobble from side to side, or they become misaligned. And then, of course, it's really difficult to play the guitar with that. And of course, patients then lose a lot of range. So they try to make a fist like this and bring their nail into the palm crease here. They can sometimes only get their nails down to within about 3 or 4 centimeters of the palm crease because of stiffness in the joints. And there's lots of little workarounds that we can deal with those actually. We've seen some patients with those, haven't we?
Yes, we have actually. And I was wondering, for those who are listening to this conversation here and watching it, can you explain why this happens, the arthritis, and why we see it in older guitarists?
Yeah, we don't see an awful lot of inflammatory arthritis. So that's things like rheumatoid and gout and other rarer forms of inflammatory arthritis. It's mostly osteoarthritis. It's mostly just simple wear and tear. And I think that comes about as a result of long-term pressure and loading on joints. And joints tend to fail, cartilage tends to fail when it's basically done more than it can cope with in a lifetime. And I know that your technique is to try to get guitarists to minimize the load that they use when they're playing guitar and be energy efficient. And I suppose all of those things will reduce the likelihood of wear and tear arthritis in the future. So that's all good prophylactic care to stop you getting it. But once you've got arthritis, I suppose reducing the load on the joint can sometimes reduce the pain, reduce the swelling, make it less stiff. And so that's a first thing to try. Splinting and supporting joints can sometimes be helpful to get the swelling down, take some of the strain off some of the ligaments that have been strained, give the joint a bit more stability. Our hand therapists can guide people through that. Steroid injections are sometimes helpful. In fact, I was reading the Downbeat jazz magazine that I get, and John McLaughlin was interviewed in that recently, saying that he went for regular injections with his US physician, who did 3 or 4 injections a year for him in different joints in his hands to keep his hands going after 40 or 50 years of, it must be 50 years of guitar playing now at the very top level.
Yeah, absolutely. And he plays a lot of notes when he's playing, that's for sure. He's played thousands and thousands of notes, there's no doubt about that. Yeah, that's really interesting. I think that what I try to do mostly is say to them, if you have this condition, think that the fingers shouldn't do any work on their own. There are a few situations on the guitar where the fingers do a lot, if you do pull-offs, for example, and things like that. But really think about this unit of your shoulder and your arm and your wrist and your hand, and that the fingers are being placed by that unit on the guitar.
Yeah.
And when you are doing that, actually they are in a relaxed state. And I usually know the concept that I talked about before about partial relaxation. So maybe not try to put all your fingers down on the guitar if you're not using them anyway. Have them just ready, but in a relaxed pose, and just use the finger that you need to play, say, one note with, whilst the other fingers are ready, but not in action on the fretboard.
Yeah, indeed. Yeah, and when you've seen people with stiff fingers generally, are there other technical things that you can advise them?
The other thing I look at is when they're playing things, is there another way of playing it?
Yeah.
Would there be somewhere else on the guitar that you might be able to play it?
Yeah.
Which of course sometimes is the case. And would that make it easier for you?
Yeah, yeah, because some of them they've lost flexion, and that's a problem for lots of chord shapes. From my very basic guitar playing when I was a teenager, those chord shapes where you need quite deep flexion on your fingers. I'm sure, as you say, there are lots of different ways of playing those chords, and you can keep going. Yes, I understand that there are lots of things you don't really need to play bar chords. You can find other ways around that.
Yeah, definitely. And also sometimes you might think, well, if you can't play this, but maybe you can't play all 6 notes of a chord, but if you can play 3 notes of the chord, maybe the 3 most important one,
yes,
then you still get the music and the feel. It obviously becomes a different arrangement, which for classical guitarists, maybe they would see that obviously as a disaster. But if you're playing sort of more popular styles of music, it just becomes a different arrangement of that song.
Yeah, we all know about guitarists that have had terrible things happen to their hands. Tony Iommi, for example, for Black Sabbath, burned his fingertips off the day before he went full-time professional and created a new guitar genre by just playing on 2 chords, but very effectively, just playing 2 notes. Yeah.
Yeah. And the famous case is, of course, Django Reinhardt, who still was able to play amazing guitar, even though he had the incident with his hand.
Yeah, so there's a lot of guitar playing left for people who do have stiff fingers. And yes, we could talk about surgery a little bit. And surgery is essentially joint replacement. At the base of the thumb here, you can do a trapezectomy and put in a small silastic joint replacement down here. That works really quite well to return to people to effective playing, actually. And because, as you teach people, they don't need to use very much pressure on their thumb, that would work to restore the thumb function. The smaller joints in the fingers can be replaced as well. And they work reasonably well, but it's not going to return somebody to top level playing. So that's very much a last resort. Fusions of joints, you can fuse them in one stiff position to take the pain away. And that might work for some people, but generally you're then talking about salvage really.